Hey folks, Matt McQueenie, Mix Minus Podcast. It is Wednesday, September 26th. I've started to do my podcast more during the week because weekends are becoming a little untenable with a growing nearly 4-year-old. My son Liam will be 4 in November 11th, Veterans Day. I don't know if it's a bad thing, I never knew Veterans Day was that day until my son was born on it, but this little man is not having naps at the rate he used to. And nap time was when I used to get many of my podcasts done because it would give you anywhere between an hour and 3 hours. 3 hours was very hopeful, wishful thinking maybe. At one point he did, but it had become more of an hour and a half to 2 hour affair when he was giving it to us. And now he is not really giving it to us in a consistent manner. He's not giving it to me, my wife, my mom, my wife's mom. He does give it for our nanny, who's with him 2 or 3 times during the week. So that's always something she's able to hold over us. But because he's not doing that, I just don't have the same opening to get podcasts done on the weekend. And I would much prefer to do that because you're a little fresher. Your mind is a little more open because it's not stuck on the responsibilities you have during the weekdays. You still have your responsibilities. I still have to mow the lawn and do various chores, but you got to do what you got to do. And sometimes necessity is, or what is it? I forget the saying. Something about necessity breeds something. So here I am on a Wednesday. Last week I did it on a Thursday when I talked about the new Apple announcement. And I'm still kind of torn on what I'm going to do there. I probably have 2 more payments left on my current iPhone 10. I would have to pay a prepayment penalty or whatever because I need to have it for a year before I'm free and clear to buy it without any costs associated other than tax and an upgrade fee. And right now it's there's about $100 left on that. I'm not really feeling the need to give that payment in order to get into the newer phones because I'm just not totally sure that the newer phones have enough of a benefit to take that cost on. So I'm just going to wait and then we'll see what happens over the next 2 months, which I'm assuming it'll be. In 2 months, perhaps we'll see that the iPhone XS Max has become this unbelievable hit, or I'll just see, hey, let me just upgrade to the XS and I'll get a little bit of a better bionic chip or whatever, or system, a little snappier, a little quicker, and I'll also get something that doesn't have these little kind of divots on the phone. I just do that each time. Every time I get a new phone, I'm so happy because I don't have any marking or scuffs on it. And then very quickly, it often disabuses me of that notion because within a couple of weeks, I often get some little scuffs and you can't get them out, and then it drives you nuts. And you only see them when the phone is off because you can really only see them in the darkness unless you're really looking deep at it to try to see it. But it's a pain because you might be watching something on your phone and maybe the scene gets a little dark on the video you're watching and there's that scuff. And I've actually found a little pro tip here. The scuff happens from keys. So to consider when you're putting all the things in your pockets you have to put in there. So I have a wallet, I have keys, I have my phone, and I have my little AirPods case. That's default for what I carry out. I don't keep my wallet in my back pocket. It's one of those weird little things that you pick up over time. And I heard the story enough when I was having back issues that you shouldn't put your wallet on your back pocket because for the amount of time you're sitting during the day, whether you're in your car, whether you're at work, whether you're on your couch, although it's a little more forgiving on the couch because it's a lot softer. But if you think about that wallet being on that back pocket, you're always pretty much putting it in the one pocket. And even if you're putting it in either pocket, it's always going to be on one side. Then when you sit, that side of your body is kind of raised up and maybe kind of cascading up your back and all that kind of stuff. So ever since that, I've kept from putting my wallet in my back pocket. So I put that in the front pocket. And what I have to remember, and for some reason I forget this every time I get a new phone, you cannot put your phone in the same pocket with the keys. Keys will scuff that sucker up so quickly. And they're the little annoying scuffs that you can't get rid of. Even though you look it up and you see all the urban legend things about, well, put it in baking powder and rub it over, doesn't work. I don't know if it's because of the newer screens and glass that they're using. I'm not sure, but the scuffs don't come out. They don't ruin the phone. when you send them back, when you send the phones back that have the scuffs, you don't have to report that they're scuffed. You can say no, and that's never been disputed when I send them in. Maybe it's because Verizon just doesn't really care. They all want to get new phones into your hands and get more money and more services. So maybe they just accept it, and they really should care, but it's not a big deal. But I might just end up going to the 10S regular just because I'm cool with this form factor. I want to get the scuffs out by getting a new phone, and because I can get a new phone, and I should. Why sit on it when it's already paid off? Again, I talked about the fact that that's kind of a conservative nightmare, not conservative politics, but conservation. It's something that each phone that you give up it's funny. Around the world, minerals are dug up out of the ground to basically create these phones. And then within a year, I'm already sending it back, and it's going back into the ground in some garbage zone or wherever it goes. You see so many documentaries where it's basically saying it's going off into some Chinese village where kids are walking around in bare feet picking apart these old phones that people have already given up, these phone graveyards. But hopefully it's not that. Hopefully it's a little bit more of a reseller deal where the phone, which is only a year old, can then be put on the market and sold for a little less, almost like a used car, but a nice used car. A used car that was maybe just a rental, or not a rental, a lease. 2 years, 24,000 miles, or whatever rentals are now, or leases. So you get that car as a purchaser, a pre-owned car, and it's not in as bad a shape as you would imagine because the miles are limited. It's only been used for a couple of years, and you're able to pay for it at a little bit of a better price, especially if you're thinking of premium cars. So the things we have to consider in our minds to get us through them and justify. But I'm in this plan where I really should be re-upping. So I'm going to wait these 2 months, 2 more payments, and then I think I will re-up and potentially go for the iPhone XS. Another big story in my neck of the woods lately. Last weekend, not the weekend that just passed, but a week ago, I went to Austin, Texas. And I had done a podcast where I talked all about, it's called Houston to Austin. I talked all about these plans I had to go to Austin to see USC play at the University of Texas in Austin. And I was kind of going over and sort of discussing with myself and arguing with myself whether it was something that I should do, whether it was justified because of price, doing kind of the calculus there. And I came to the understanding via that podcast, I had not pressed purchase yet, but I did end up doing it, that if I flew to Houston via Spirit Airlines, that I could save a lot of money, that you would go from about a $550 round trip going from Newark to Austin down to a $180 round trip if you go to Houston. And then if you could go ahead and rent a car, which I did end up doing, I got about a $20 per day mid-size SUV. It ended up being a Kia Sportage, which was kind of fun to ride. After riding a Toyota Prius for the last 5 years or so now, I've really been a Prius guy. To get back into a SUV was nice. I was always a Ford Explorer person. The Ford Explorer Sport Track I had, and then I had a Ford Explorer, the one with the, I think it was just a Sport, and it had the 4 doors, but it had sort of the, what's it called in the back, the pickup in the back. And so after that, I jumped over to the Prius. I've talked about why that is, because it's just such a great vehicle for gas mileage, and I kind of liked getting into the electric hybrid zone with the thought eventually at getting to a full electric vehicle. And I've gone through now into my second Prius, so I'm still waiting to jump to that next one. I may think about jumping actually in the next year or so to a Chevy, I think it's called a Bolt. So they have the Volt and the Bolt, and the Volt was their initial foray into electric vehicles, and it has a gas tank that you can fill up, and on a charge it would get you about 40 miles for each charge before the gas tank would kick in. Now they have the other one I said, I can't remember if it's the B or the V. I think the Bolt was first, and maybe this is the Volt. That would make sense because it's electric. It's all electric. My chiropractor actually has one, and he says it gets about 240 miles to the charge. That sounds great to me, so I'm very excited about that idea. But in Austin, I was looking at this, and I said, looking at kind of the finances here, if I fly into Houston, I could rent a car. I got it through Hotwire. They have amazing deals on a daily basis. So this ended up being $20 a day. I think in total with taxes and such, it ended up being about $67 for I was there for about 36 hours if you think about it. But I really just needed this vehicle to get me from Houston to Austin on Friday afternoon, local time, which is the central time zone, so 1 hour earlier than where I live here on the eastern time zone. I needed a vehicle to get me from Houston to Austin. That roughly 2.5 to 3 hour drive ended up being 3.5 because I was going in the afternoon and driving into rush hour in Austin. And then I needed the vehicle to get me back after the game the next day at about 10:30 p.m. when we were out of there, to get back from Austin at night to Houston, and then I would take back off at 6 in the morning without staying in a hotel because of the timing. So that was why I needed the vehicle. So it ended up being a massive savings going this route. $180 for the flight. There was no other cost add-ons because I was able to thread that needle, and this Spirit Airlines was fine. But if you need any more luxury, any more add-ons, the cost will escalate pretty quickly to where if you were flying normally with normal luggage size, with seat room, with just little kind of luxuries that we take for granted on quote-unquote normal airlines. But I was able to stick the landing at 180, and it ended up perfectly fine. I was actually totally cool with Spirit because I got a lot of gruff when I put a Facebook post about whether Spirit was something I should look into, and I got all the horror stories from everybody who had used Spirit. Don't do it. It was a disaster. I'm saying why, and plenty of things about luggage being an issue, the plane not taking off, and then the people going back into the office and not coming back out. The different stops being issues if you have to fly in the non-stop, if you have to fly with stops and transfers and layovers and such. But I ended up doing it because the economics were what they were, and that was just sort of my poker game. That was how much money I was going to put in. And I thought to myself, if it didn't work out, I would take the refund and I would go back home because I was only going to be in Texas for like 36 hours, as I said. So that was the money I was willing to put up. And it ended up being fine. I left on Friday morning. I left my house. My nanny came, or a babysitter for Liam came a little early that day. I drove to my office in Newark. And as always, whenever you go somewhere, it's always extremely busy back at the office. And it's almost like clients can sense when you're going to be away and things just get thrown on the pile that had never been thrown out there before. And all of a sudden, the types of things that come up would really need you to be there, but you took the day. You can't feel bad about that. And I ended up doing that. Of course, it was funny to come to my garage and park as if I was going to work because I actually saw my boss and I saw a couple people when I was in my shorts with my little backpack to head to the airport. But I was going to park at at my office garage, and then I was going to Uber over to Newark Airport. It was about a $10 Uber or so because I really wanted to make sure that the money didn't escalate in kind of different things. So I knew how much my flight was going to be. I knew my friend Matt was going to take care of the hotel. I knew he was going to kind of take care of the ticket, which was extremely nice. He said, you get down here and you'll be good. And I already got everything purchased. I got everything we need to do. And so I figured, let's make sure to not get these costs up in these different side things that I'm not thinking about. So if I went to park at Newark Airport and I wanted to park short term, for instance, it's going to be like $25, $30 a day probably. If I wanted to park long term, it's going to be a pain to get to the airport. So I figured, let me go to my garage, which I'm already paying for out of my paycheck. It's not a terrible price, but I pay for it. And as long as I could make sure that I would be able to get out of there on a Sunday, which I was able to do because the gym did open up, the same Planet Fitness that I now go to on my lunch breaks sometimes, did open up across the street from this garage. And so because this garage had to be open for that Planet Fitness, it was going to be open on the weekend. So that was fine. That ended up being fine. But I was going to park there, and then I was going to take an Uber right from my office to Newark Airport. That was fine. I got to the airport, and Spirit doesn't really have a counter. It's sort of like your best bet is to print everything at home or have the app and then go straight to the security line. There's also costs that you really want to prepay for if you do this. If you need to put luggage onto the plane, if you need to check it, if you need to bring luggage on the plane as a carry-on, there's a limit to that. I made sure to get my smallest JanSport backpack and to not overstuff that thing. I brought very few clothes. It was just going to be a guy's trip. I'm already married. I'm not looking to impress women with my clothes wearing. So I really didn't mind to sort of underpack. I was going to a warm place. It was still September. So I really just had a couple of, I had what was on my back and on my body in the form of cargo shorts and t-shirts, or a t-shirt. And then I just brought like a couple of little like t-shirts, some boxers, some socks. And that was about it. And then I had my tablet, because the thing with Spirit, it's totally fine, but there are no luxuries. There are no televisions on any of the seat backs. The tray table is like a half-size tray table. It's almost like a joke. It's almost like they're saying to you, you're on candid camera. You're on candid plane camera. We're going to make everything look ridiculous, and we're going to see if you react. But everyone knows this going in, so it wasn't a problem. Talking to people who took Spirit, a lot of them came to it because it's in the kind of Expedia, Hotwire, those kind of sites. It's in the mix with those. So you might end up unwittingly purchasing from Spirit because it's going to fulfill into the location you need to go. I knew full well what I was getting into with Spirit. I bought it through the site, and I really kind of poured over what the size restrictions were. And I have a bigger backpack, almost like a camping backpack. And it's funny because that actually would have fit on the plane, but I was able to fit what I needed to into this JanSport backpack. I brought my one tablet, my one iPad Pro, 9.5 inch or 9.7 inch, whichever one it is. I loaded the whole thing, downloaded the entire first season of Ozark and the entire third season of Narcos, and I figured I'd be fine. And so I got on the plane. Everything seemed to be going fine. We took off on time. Everything was great. The flight was totally fine. Shortly into the flight, which I actually brought my own food as well, which is a smart thing. Everything is for sale on these planes. So you really want to keep costs down by bringing what you need with you. Everything went fine. In fact, I was in a row where the row in front of us, there were two open seats. So one woman from our row ended up going to the row in front of us. So me and the other traveler ended up having a seat between us where we could put our stuff. So that ended up really working out well. And I started up Ozark on the flight. I love Ozark, and maybe this is the way to watch it. You have to binge it. I had no choice. The world was at my beck and call. It was my oyster, whatever you want to say. I had nothing but time. I was on an airline where there's no Wi-Fi, there's no entertainment. Luckily, I had downloaded everything I needed on that Ozark. So I put on my AirPods, and I just started watching Ozark. Now, the funny thing, I don't know if anyone else feels this way about travel, but if you're on a plane that has entertainment on the seat back, if there's like a sex scene that shows up, and I don't even know if they would, but I guess if you're on DirecTV, on like JetBlue, you're watching normal television, there could be something that's a little risque, right? When you have your own entertainment, you could literally be watching porn, right? Because it's your own downloads. And I always wonder, what do the people around you think? So look, I was not watching porn, but anybody who's seen Ozark, and maybe those who are looking to see it, in the first episode, the wife of the main character played by Jason Bateman. I always say that, or not always, I've said in some ways this is almost like Jason Bateman's Breaking Bad. It's like Bateman Bad. So you had the sitcom character in Bryan Cranston in Breaking Bad, and then he kind of becomes this unbelievably dark, dramatic figure in Breaking Bad, and then it becomes everything we think of him. Jason Bateman's a very similar thing. He's a comedic guy. He's very dry humor. Everything he's in is sort of humorous. Even when you think of the family show there on that was picked back up by Netflix, Arrested Development. And so that's where you come to this from. So it's fun to see him play this role. And I find in this one, he maintains more of his other characters in this show, in this dramatic role, than even Bryan Cranston did in his role in Breaking Bad. So it brings sort of a fresh feel to this. But in the first episode, he has a private investigator following his wife because he presumes she is cheating, and he has the video, and there is like pretty stark sex in this, oral sex, doggy style sex. And I often think, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I want to tell everyone, look, I'm not watching anything crazy. I'm just watching a normal Netflix show. But you're sort of angling the iPad down because you don't want other people to see this, to think there's something weird going on. How do you play that? I don't know. Do you just play it out loud and be like, whatever? Hey, there could be kids around. Their eyes shouldn't be seeing it. I don't know. But I angled it down until the scene is over, and then I brought it back up. Now, it's part of the story is this video that was taped with these scenes. So this scene comes up like it feels like when you feel like you're being watched like 10 times in the first episode. It's unbelievable how much this comes up. So you're constantly turning it down, and then you're like, people know why you're turning it down, and you're waiting for little giggles. I don't know. But I don't know how people deal with that, but you just deal, I guess. You just move forward and pretend like it's not there. But I got into that show, and it's like a nice 3 and change hour trip to Houston from Newark. Everything was fast, actually. We got there quicker, and you gain the hour because you're going to the central time zone. But I got through a handful of episodes, and I was hooked immediately. It is a good show. It's a really good show. I'd almost say it's 75 to 80% of the peak of Breaking Bad, which, look, that's really good. If you can be 75 to 80% of the, 98 Yankees, you still could win a World Series. You're still good enough. Or maybe we say even of the 2018 Boston Red Sox. Well, it's yet to be seen what they're going to win there, but that's a really worthy thing. You can still do a lot with the wild card. They're almost like the wild card version of a division champion, the Ozark. But it's really good, and it's got its own story and its own angles, which are even different than Breaking Bad. It starts in Chicago. And what you come to find with this show, which just kind of drops you into the story piece by piece, which I always like. I like that kind of storytelling because it keeps you a little off guard. Everything's not explained to you. I didn't do a lot of reading on it either. And that was probably what kept me from watching it, because it almost looked silly. Like it looked almost like a mockumentary doing Breaking Bad when I would see the scenes, because you just come to expect a certain Jason Bateman role. And so that might hurt the ability for people to just jump in and watch, even though the show's probably being watched by 30 or 40 million people with these Netflix numbers. But it's in Chicago, and you come to see it's him and a partner, and they're a money managing firm. And then you go down the abyss. And what you come to find out is that him and his partner are money managers, but they're also money launderers. And they use the front of this money managing company to launder tens of millions of dollars for a Mexican drug cartel. And the final scenes of the first episode bring into stark relief what happens when you skim and take money from those drug cartels. And so it is that then pivots why they end up in the Ozarks. I don't want to be a spoiler, although people should start watching it, but maybe it'll help you watch it if you find out that the guy, Jason Bateman's character, Marty, is left standing. And he's left standing because he thinks on his feet really quickly when he's about to be killed by the head of the cartel, or at least the capo who's in charge of the world that Jason Bateman is running in. He sees this pamphlet he has from the Ozarks, and he convinces the guy that this was the plan, and he hadn't yet told him, but that he was going to go down to the Ozarks, the Redneck Riviera, as they say, or as they joke, that it has more miles of shoreline than the California coast. All these things that people try to convince you of to go to these places, which you would never think to go to. It's just like it's just one scene short of Eric Estrada being there for the most part. On a Fox News infomercial, and he's able to convince this capo. He's able to intrigue him enough to go down to the Ozarks and to embed himself in this community and to try to launder money in it. And it's really interesting to see. It's almost like a startup. It's interesting to see him try to do this and how difficult it is, and how you think you're coming upon all of these rubes, these redneck rubes, but in many ways they have their own little illicit ecosystem already, where they're laundering in their own small kinds of way. And so he comes up against that, and just the turns that happen in this show are just unbelievable. It's really good. Does it get almost too much, where it's like it's sort of like when you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, and it's always going wrong for Larry, and then when he does something, two more bad things happen, and it becomes almost neurotic? There's a little bit of that in this, but it might be because I was binging it, and so everything just felt like it was happening continually, but really if you stretched it a little, it might be better. But I watched the whole show already. I moved right on and finished season 2 actually last night. So I cleared through that entire show in the in the timeline of less than 2 weeks. I would highly recommend it. It's very good. I think that it really evoked a lot to me of Breaking Bad. There was a little bit of The Americans as well. The Americans, which is the 1980s drama, or it's about the 1980s, and Russian spies who assume an identity in America, have kids, and they're spies for Russia, and they have to be married, but they're hiding a lot, right? Because they wouldn't have married in normal life, but they're married because they're both spies and they have to keep up this ruse, keep up this identity, have their kids. And that felt to me like this too, in a way, because the husband and wife probably would have been getting divorced based on this cheating video. I said I had a lot of trouble watching with a plane full of people. And here they are having to make another go of it in the Ozarks, with this kind of hidden identity. And their kids do come on to it, and they do let their kids into why they're doing this, because to just up and move your kids from the Chicago suburbs to the Ozarks, you need to do a little more explaining than we need a fresh start. So I see some Breaking Bad, The Americans, Sons of Anarchy. Once you get to the Ozarks, there's a lot of Sons of Anarchy feel to the locals. But it's a comedy, it's a drama, it's a thriller. It's really good. I was very, very intrigued by it, fascinated by it, and entranced by it. I couldn't stop watching this show. It almost feels like Breaking Bad with an Instagram filter over it in the Ozarks as opposed to in New Mexico. So all of those things kind of drop you into it in a way where it's not a clone, but it's reminiscent of Breaking Bad. And just all that is good enough. Laura Linney plays the wife. She's very good. There's a bunch of actors and actresses across this show that you'll come to know. There's, of course, the FBI agent, as all these shows have, and the FBI agent is always like a Michael Shannon type character, and they always act like Michael Shannon. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's just like in the acting book about how you be a federal agent. But it's good. There's a lot to it that I liked, and I crammed it within 2 weeks, so it had to be good. It's almost like a novel where you can't stop picking it up, and to me, that's a sign of a good show. Netflix is doing well with Ozark, and it's dropping me into wanting to watch and finish a lot of other shows. I'm sort of having my own TV renaissance now where I'm watching a lot. My next show, I think, is going to be Barry, the HBO show that got a lot of plaudits. It might have got some Emmys as well. Bill Hader's vehicle about a hitman who falls into acting. So it's got some drama. Looks like it's got some comedy, talking about Hader. Those mixes are always the best thing. It's always those hybrids that sort of keep you entranced. It's listening to different kinds of music in a way, and it just makes you feel like it's hitting all the notes you need, and in the one piece of media. It's not like you watch it and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I could use like a rom-com. Like these shows now have everything in them. They're self-contained. They're their own universes, their own ecosystems, and they lock you in. And it's because they touch all of the different points you need. So I'm trying to watch that now. Every time I saw that one, I thought it was a mockumentary of Dexter, because Bill Hader kind of looks like Dexter when you would see this show. So I thought it was a spoof of Dexter, and maybe in a way it kind of is when you think of the subject matter. Serial killer, hitman, whatever it is. So I got into Texas around 2:15 Central Time, and it's funny. I realized this is the first time I've left this time zone in like 7 years or 8 years since my wife and I went to Europe on our honeymoon. I have not left the Eastern time zone in like 8 years. How crazy is that? And I've gotten around. I've just stayed in the one time zone the whole time, whether I'm going to Florida, whether I'm going to New York State, whether I'm going to Vermont. I've always stayed here. So I had a moment of like confusion, because I was like, oh, wait. So I know the time changes, but then I'm looking at emails and I'm like, wait, are the email times in this time zone or the other time zone? There was a lot of confusion going on for me. And you come to realize the whole system changes, right? But how weird is that you can be outside of the time zone for as much as I used to travel, that I have not left the time zone. So I was almost very, very surprised by that. Then I got in the car. It was just, the world was open to you. I got actually I had to take a little shuttle over to where you get the car rentals. It's like its own little campus. And all the car rental companies are there. They all must be obviously owned by the same company at this point, just different names. Is what it is. But I had signed up with one, but it was at the desk with like 4 others, so they all must be the same. And it's funny because these people, which they try to do in any walk of life really, they try to upsell you on more services than what you had purchased. And so what I made sure to do, because the one thing they try to upsell you on immediately when you're making the purchase of the car through Hotwire is to get car insurance. And the car insurance was at $9 a day. And so even though I was going to be 36 hours, I was only going to really be using the cars barely stretched over a day. It had to use the fact that I would have the car across Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday up to like 2:30 or 3 a.m. And so that $27, it's not the end of the world. You're covered, whatever. But I didn't want to add up to the cost. So I called my car insurance and I said, "Do you cover rental cars?" And they said, "Well, yes, we do. Just bring your insurance card with you." I went, boom. And so I got up to the counter and the woman was like, "Oh, do you want to add the package for $12 a day that gives you the version of Easy Pass for this?" And I was like, no, I don't think so. And then she's like, "Do you want to add this?" And I'm like, "No." And then she's like, "And do you want to have," or she said, "Do you want the higher level of insurance or do you just want the basic?" And I said, "Oh, my car insurance said they cover it." And she goes, "Oh, okay. All right, just sign there." So it's like I didn't need any of that, but those upsells probably help them. They help them help their bottom line when they can upsell each of these products, which you don't need. But all told, I got out there and a gentleman was like, "Oh, what do you need?" And I said, "I'm in this section." And he goes, "All right, pick whatever you want from this whole section." I'm like, "Really?" Felt like Batman or something. But apparently that's how you do it. So you get a midsize SUV. It's just generic. I thought they assign you one, but he's like, "No, pick whatever you want." So I'm like walking around in circles and I just ended up at a Kia Sportage. And I got in it. And, you just got to get yourself set. You got to make sure you know how the wipers work, how the lights work. You don't want to find that you don't know how to do that at the wrong time. And then I did the thing. You just plug your normal iPhone cable right into the car and you're home free as if it's your own car. It's great. So I'm rolling out of there. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm listening to music. And I come up out of Houston and I was having a moment of terror because there were some tolls. I was like, "Oh my God, do I just drive through?" And I ended up having a couple dollars, luckily. So I did that. And then it was just the open road from north of Houston all the way into Austin. I think it was Highway 290. And you're going across these roads. And I was like, I was telling myself, I'll stop and get some coffee and a little snack. And of course, I'm like looking for something that's purely Texas-like. But the first thing I stopped at was a Dunkin' Donuts. And it was funny because it was just in a gas station rest stop type deal. And the Dunkin' Donuts was like set up in little canisters. So it's funny the way Dunkin' Donuts kind of franchises out. Like we would never do that in the Northeast. There would always be a Dunkin' Donuts storefront, even in a stop like this. And then you would go to someone and get a fresh cup. The coffee was fine. I actually got a muffin. And I just kept rolling, and I was hocked up on caffeine, though. That's the only issue. I had been traveling a lot at this point. I mean, when I really did the math, I wasn't thinking of this way, but I was on a plane for 3.5 hours, and then I was in the car for 3.5 hours. So I was pretty much in transit for 7. Now, you don't think of it because you're in new environs, you're looking around, you're taking pictures, which you really shouldn't do, but I was. And it was open country. It was something different than when you're at home. So it was just really invigorating. And it's a Friday afternoon. You're an hour back. So basically by 5, no one's going to bother you anyway. And it's only 4 there. It was beautiful. The other funny thing is you get used to how things are in the Northeast, right? When I'm coming out of the one stop, when I got the Dunkin' Donuts, there was a guy in front of me, kind of a tough looking, gruff, like firefighter type of guy. And here, in the Northeast, they would be the ones who might have a heart of gold, but they might be a little tough around the edges or rough around the edges when they're talking to you, or in their politeness. So I'm coming out of this Dunkin' Donuts and this guy held the door for me and I'm like, "Oh, thanks so much." He goes, "You're welcome, sir. No problem." I'm like, "Whoa, are you fucking with me, dude?" You're like used to that. You're not used to just niceness for its own sake. And everyone was nice. I mean, it's weird to experience that. It's why you got to get up out of your zone. You got to get into other places. It just keeps things fresh. And so then I get onto the one road, which is like a final 70-mile pass to Austin. And some of the speed limits were, I'm seeing 70, and I'm like, whoa. And then 75 mile an hour speed limit. Unbelievable. So then I get into Austin. And the other thing I'm thinking is, how am I going to conserve money? So parking's a big deal. And of course, I should have done this research before, but I'm researching as I'm driving on a 75 mile an hour road where I can park. I'm seeing the hotel has parking, $43 a day. I'm not going to pay $90 to drop the car off and have someone just put it in another lot. I mean, that just felt crazy. But then you're driving at 75 miles an hour trying to figure out where to park. I came across this cool service, and it was in Apple Maps. It's called Parkopedia. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a really cool service. And what it does is it's almost like an Expedia of parking. So you put an address in, and then it'll tell you across the zone what the prices are for all the different parking places. And I came across one that seemed to be a couple blocks on the same street as our hotel, which was the Aloft downtown. Really cool hotel. And it seemed to be that it was $20 a day, and that you could pay from your phone. And so I was going to be there about 36 hours, right? So I saw you could pay for the day, and then you could pay for a block of time after, and that would end up being $32 in total. Very different from $90. So that's another savings. You're paying about a third what you would have if you didn't think that hard about it. Now, I did get to this place, and of course, you're rolling into a new city. You're feeling a little anxious from all the coffee, from being in a new place, from being by yourself, although I'm invigorated too. And I rolled in through the back of Austin, and there was so much traffic because it was rush hour. Then I'm driving. I'm like, oh, bam, an In-N-Out burger. They made it over here to Austin. That's pretty cool. Kept that in the Rolodex for another time. And so I come into the city. I find the little lot I liked. Now, this lot was next to like a Methodist church. And when some of these churches end up being like homeless shelters as well, this entire parking lot, which I was going to be using, seemed like it was being guarded or lorded over by the entire homeless community of Austin. Now, they were nice as well, but it felt a little strange to just park this rental car there. And there weren't a ton of cars there, and then you pay for it from your smartphone. So the whole thing felt a little funny, but I said, hey, F it. A third of the price. I'll live with it. I'll check on the car a few times. It was only a couple blocks from our hotel. Let's do it. Who cares? Paid for it from the phone, went to the hotel. I got my little backpack on, I'm in my shorts, and I walk into this hotel, and this hotel is happening. There was so much going on there. This was like a Friday happy hour time. The first level of the hotel right in downtown Austin there had a whole coffee shop called Airlines, and then they had Airlines upstairs, which is on the second floor, and it was sort of a loft, outdoor seating too. Nice bar, a lot of action, and that was at the lobby level, which was 2, and there was a lot of great drinks and everything going on. But I walk in just sort of unassuming with my backpack on. I looked like a vagrant. And I just sat down and waited for my friend and his brother to come. They showed up. We got up into the room. Then we went out into Austin a little bit. I knew this was going to be the one night I would do a little bit of drinking, because I would already be turning around the next day, that next night, and then going back to Houston overnight. So I wanted to make sure that I conserved energy for that and that I handled this the right way. So Friday night would really be it. We walked along 6th Street there. Austin's great. Austin has every aspect, it has the great aspect of almost every city in America. It's a real city like New York. It's big. It's booming. It's got some hill action like San Francisco, and it's got the tech aspect like San Francisco and Silicon Valley. A lot of tech startups there. It's got the university aspect, University of Texas, as big as it gets really around the country, right? And it had the Beale Street, New Orleans aspect downtown where there's just a party at all times. I mean, it is a great city. I could totally live there. And it's funny because I'm looking at it and saying, oh, this is everything I like. And then this week, I happen to be reading an article in the New Yorker about a musician named Alejandro Escovedo. And he's apparently the guy who's sort of the most famous songwriter who never quite made it. And he had gone to live in Austin since the 1980s, and he ended up leaving because he said it got too gentrified, too popular, too expensive. And he said it's overrun with this hipster thing. I'm told it gets 1,000 new people a week. I blame myself for going around the world telling people how great Austin is. And so I'm sitting there going, oh, so this part I like, which is really cool, is actually what are driving the people who originally said it was cool to leave. Who knows? You can't make everyone happy. Isn't it funny that article pops up like right away after I was there for the first time having these thoughts? That's how it works, baby. Synchronicity, as I talked. So we're walking around downtown trying to figure out where to go, and we came upon this place called the Iron Cactus. Phenomenal Mexican food, or Tex-Mex, I guess you would say if we're in Texas, right? Phenomenal food. Good chips and salsa, good quesadillas, great enchiladas. Had about 3 local IPAs, and we were seated at the bar, and of course the Mets Red Sox are on the TV, so that was fun to watch. They actually won, I think that was the 8-0 game maybe, where Syndergaard pitched. and we're watching some Friday night college football. The world is everything. It's open. We're having good conversations. I don't have to worry about home, although I could check in on my Nest Cam and see that my son was asleep. All is good in the world. My wife was asleep. You just have that feeling of nothing can touch me right now. There's very few times in life anymore, and I'm not saying this in a way that I miss this, because this is how life works when you're a busy person, when you aspire for more. There's very few times in life, though, where you can just kind of sit back and nothing's going to get you. Now, something will get you when you think that way, but in general, you have these moments. I tend to have this moment when my wife and I have our yearly anniversary night where we go out and stay overnight. You know my son is safe, or we know my son is safe. He's with my parents, and we're just on our own. We're going to have massages. We're going to go out to eat. We're just going to have a nice night. We're going to be able to sleep in. There's those moments where you can kind of harken back to when you were on your own and you were safe and secure, and you could worry about just yourself for a moment, or just yourself and your spouse if you're out like that. It's a nice feeling to have once in a while, and it reminds you of some things, and it refreshes you on some things. So we're just there having a good old time. Then we rolled out of there because, of course, the downside here is I'm exhausted. I've been up since pretty much 6:30 a.m. Eastern time, which would have been 5:30 a.m. Texas. All the travel, all the driving, coming down from the coffee, coming down from the beer, the food. And so we started walking out, and I'm with two guys who are sober. They've been sober for several years now, so it's not like partying all night's going to be on the docket. And also, you want to be careful about how hard you're going to go, because, again, I had to conserve for the next day. So I reached my fill. We're walking back, and then we found this really cool place called Voodoo Donuts. It's a Portland, Oregon founded place, but there it was in Austin. It was a centerpiece here on 6th Street. Got a phenomenal donut. Oh, my God. It ended the night nicely. It was like a peanut butter chocolate. It was like it was perfect. They had like Fruit Loops ones. They had Fruity Pebbles. They had all kinds of donuts, and they were almost like donut and a half sizes. So it wasn't like you were, jonesing for another one. It was the perfect size. So yeah, it was a good night. We ended up just kind of heading back, and sometimes it's okay just to pass out. They gave me my own bed because my friend was in one, and then his little brother got a cot. I just passed out. My body woke me up at 7, though. Force of habit. That was 8 at home, and it was a clear night of sleep, so that worked out fine. But we got up, and my friend Matt and I, we went down to that first floor to get a cup of coffee and to talk. And I'll tell you what, we ended up getting bulletproof coffee. And I don't know if anyone's heard of Bulletproof. I heard of it because I was a huge, and I still am, a consumer of Joe Rogan's podcast, but I used to be like someone who listened to it all the time. It's hard, though, with those 3-hour blocks and 4 coming out a week. It's just difficult to keep up. So I end up just not listening to it, because it's like, where do you drop in? Which one do you listen to? And I have a whole lot of other things that get into the queue first, and it just gets tough. Sorry. But when I was listening to it intensely, which is an important aspect of listening to his show, when you get into it first, it feels like the world is open. Again, that feeling. He's talking to people. They're having, higher level conversations, deep conversation, long form conversation, not interview necessarily, but just two people talking, and it's great. But he used to do this Bulletproof coffee, and they would be a sponsor, and they were in his On It store. And what it is it's a mold-free coffee, which you come to find out is a lot of coffees that are single source. It's a mold-free coffee, and then you sort of whip it up with grass-fed butter, weird, I know, and MCT oil. And what this does is this mix creates a frothy, nice, rich tasting, and healthy fat embedding drink, which, teaming with the coffee, gives you a higher level of mental clarity, weight loss benefits, just everything up and down the row. Just a really high level cup of coffee. And it was $9. But my friend's like, hey, you only live once, I'll pay for it. So we both got this coffee down there because they were pushing it. It's sort of a Southwestern thing. I think the guy who created it, Dave Asprey, is from New Mexico. And it was great. I mean, it was cool. I don't know if it was placebo, but I feel like it kind of saved me for the day, I feel like. And maybe it was placebo. Maybe I would have been fine if I had a Dunkin' Donuts cup of coffee. But I got a little stomach ache too, because all that fat and like coconut oil, and I mean, it was insane. But this coffee it's supposedly high level. You can make it at home. It's a little more expensive than your typical cup of coffee. But what it does is the fats almost keep the caffeine around in a more monitored and even-keeled way. It can almost act as a meal replacement too, when all the things work together, and that was what ended up being the case here. But we had those over. It took a while to drink it too. It was rich, and when I took a picture of it and put it up, a lot of people said it didn't look like it was mixed right, that it should look more frothy, and this looked more like an oil slick. But it did the job. Then my friend Matt and I were just like, hey, let's just go for a walk. So we ended up walking like 10,000 steps. We went up and around over to the stadium, all the way up the hill, then through the University of Texas, and then back down all the way to the water, and then back up to our hotel. Just nice to get a good walk in. And it's funny, they got these Lime scooters all over the place. So there's scooters that you can rent with a smartphone and pay for with a smartphone. And then you pretty much just leave the scooters when you're done, wherever that is. And then the next person can pick it up, or maybe they have people going around to pick them up. So that was kind of a big thing that was going on there. But we got back to the hotel, and then Matt wanted to lay down. And what we were going to do was we were just going to have like an almost college day, where we were just going to chill out at the hotel, watch college football, and then head up to the game around 5 p.m. local time. Walk back up there as we did earlier in the morning. And so I said, oh, we haven't eaten yet. Oh my God, the In-N-Out. Let's get In-N-Out burgers. And they were all on board. So I Ubered out with his brother, who had to stop at a bank. And this was sort of out in the middle of not a lot going on. We Ubered out to this bank, and it was pouring rain. And we actually couldn't get an Uber back out of there for a while. So we went over to a H-E-B supermarket, and then we were ultimately able to Uber in with a blue Prius out to an In-N-Out burger, which was a little more out on the path. I think it was like Westlake Village or something like that, or Westlake, Texas. Got our In-N-Out, and then we were able to Uber back with a woman who had a lot of plastic surgery done. Older, but she was very nice, and she had kids, and she was just talking to us the whole time. I'm very impressed with people who do Uber and Lyft, and they try to make it happen for themselves by kind of stitching together a living. It's very enterprising. I'm very impressed with it. I wish I could do that. I wish I could be a little more entrepreneurial and enterprising. Not that it's necessarily entrepreneurial, but it's just trying to get things done and use the system and try new things. She got us back to our hotel. On the way up, I stopped at that second floor bar, got a nice IPA, had my IPA, had my phenomenal In-N-Out double burger, some fries, and then I told myself, because I got this overnight drive, I have to conserve, I have to rest where possible. I'm not going to sleep tonight. Somehow, maybe it was the beer, the burgers, all that, the walks in the morning, I laid down at 2 and I fell asleep till 4. So I got 2 hours of sleep. I was refreshed. We went up to the game around 5. We walked all the way up. What an atmosphere. It was tremendous up there in Texas. We walked in, and we got into the stadium about an hour earlier. We were just watching everything. There was just so much action. It ended up being the largest crowd in Texas, University of Texas history. Over 103,000 people filled this stadium to watch USC Texas. And it was an experience. First of all, we were in the upper deck, and the views of the city of Austin, when you look over look out towards the city, are phenomenal. Looking down at the stadium, it was phenomenal. Just the pomp and circumstance, the fight songs, the Texas band. It was like a Super Bowl, how high level this thing was. Prime time. They had the F-16 flyover, which you could just feel shake you. It was great. Matthew McConaughey is out on the field, which I appreciate. And then during the game, they have the McConaughey, and they'll just like drop the video on him, put him on the big screen at certain times, and then he'll look all unassuming, like he's not looking at it. And then all of a sudden, he just wilds it out and goes crazy, and then puts the hook 'em horns up, and the whole crowd goes nuts. It was cool. Mo Bamba was there, who's now on Orlando, played for University of Texas last year. Vince Young was inducted into some Hall of Fame, I believe. So he was there. Obviously, him and Ricky Williams are on the Longhorn Network. It was just a cool vibe. It was so nice. Now, ultimately, USC was getting pummeled by the third quarter. So my friend Matt, who's a USC just fanatic, had enough, and he's like, we got to get out of here. I can't watch this anymore. And so that gave me the chance to kind of get out of town a little earlier. Got back to the car shortly after 10:30 at my little makeshift lot there. Car was fine. Got in the SUV. All I had was popcorn a little earlier and a big water, because I was like, you know what, on my ride, I'll use that as a way to kill a little more time, to have a good meal on the ride since I'm not going to be going to bed tonight. And I left town. And I'll tell you what, the one thing I wasn't thinking about was the ride back to Houston. So the ride in was at worst at twilight, but it was still very bright out because it's mid-September. The light is still very ever present. I didn't need lights at all. Going back though, these stretches of desert roads, 75 mile an hour, no towns anywhere in sight, it was a little scary. So the one thing I told myself was, do not look at your phone like this whole time. It's just not worth it. Look at your map, keep up to date with that. But it was darkness on the edge of town. There was nothingness. Once you left Austin proper and some of the towns that are on the way out there, which have a bit of action because of their proximity to Austin, there's nothing. There are like 3 towns all the way back. Many of them were closed, and I was just having trouble figuring out what I should eat. I was like, oh, should I just go to McDonald's? But then again, I already had In-N-Out Burger. I don't want to have more burgers. Then I was like, I should have gone to Whataburger because that's a kind of Texas staple and they're 24 hours. And they were open even into some of the far off towns when I was like 50, 60, 70 miles into the trip. But it was a long trip, and I didn't think about this aspect of the darkness. And if the car ever broke down, I wasn't going to be helped until the next day, because who's out there? It is a level of darkness and a level of just nothingness happening out there that you can't even comprehend in some of the denser places we live and are used to. There is just nothingness, and not nothingness for a couple miles, nothingness for 40 miles. That's a whole nother level. And so I was like, man, I'm really trying to thread a needle here. This has to go perfectly right. So I kept the phone down. I listened to The Economist, and I just kind of went, and I would check my GPS every so often just to see how far I was. But then I was like, oh, where am I going to stop to eat? How's this going to work out? And then I remembered leaving Houston. There was a few exits that had Waffle Houses. You know how much I love Waffle Houses. And so I looked it up, and it said I would get to the furthest out Waffle House in Cypress, Texas at around 1:15. And so I thought, I'm going to go for it. That's what I want to do. I pulled up to this Cypress, Texas eventually, which is still about 40 miles from the airport, 1:30 in the morning. And this is one of those experiences that you could never imagine you're going to be in. Alone at Cypress, Texas, at a Waffle House, belly up to the bar, belly up to the counter at 1:30 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning at home, eating a Grand Slam or whatever special at Waffle House, getting your waffle, your eggs, your bacon. And the beauty of it is that since I had In-N-Out for breakfast or brunch, this was totally cool to have it, what is this, overnight dinner? Or would that be Deckfist or something? Or Brinner? I don't know. You don't get that mix a lot. But it was great. I was just there. I picked my I put together my picks for the week right there because I knew I wouldn't be able to do that in time. And I just remember looking up at the security cam, which was smack dab on me, on my back, thinking, what am I doing here? If at any time someone's like, where were the whereabouts of Matt McQueenie? Here I am on this security cam. And I took a picture to put on Instagram because it's just weird. Here I am, 2 a.m., posting Waffle House from Cypress, Texas. It was just one of those things. It was fun. It's good. When it all works out, it's fine. In the moment, you're a little anxious, but it was fine. I got out of there, filled that car up with gas, which you have to do because I opted for that option to bring it back full. And then I made my ride back, and it worked out fine. I got in there just after 2:30, maybe 2:40 a.m. Luckily, it hadn't eaten up enough gas to where it was still smack on that F-line, and dropped it off. There was one guy there. What's his life like? The guy who's there to take the cars being dropped off in the middle of the night. Just the one guy who looked like he's in some emo or punk band or something. And dropped it off, got back on the tram, which keeps rolling, and got to the airport terminal, or to the main entrance of the airport. Terminals weren't even open yet. I started walking up to security. They're like, yeah, they'll be open at 3:20. And it was like 10 to 3. So it's another one of those where am I moments, because I'm exhausted, but I got adrenaline. I'm up. I knew I made it. And so it was just a weird situation. I just started looking up weird things that crossed my mind. I was listening to some podcasts, maybe Howard Stern even, got through security, got a couple of things for Melanie and my son, and then I sat down to wait out the plane. So I was seated about 3:45, and I just started watching more Ozark. And then at about 4 a.m. local time there, I'm getting a call from Melanie. 5 a.m. at home. What the hell is she doing calling? Of course, I've watched so much Ozark that I think that they're being held hostage or something. Because why is she calling at 5 a.m.? And so she says, I pick up the phone and say, hello? She's crying. And she says, there's a flying squirrel in the house. And I'm like, wait, what? What? She said, there's a flying squirrel in the house. And so I'm torn between, she's totally sleep talking. She's dreaming this up. I've lived in this house for 7.5 years and never had a flying squirrel in the house. We had a chipmunk earlier before the summer, but we took care of that. It was a one-off event. Yes, we have flying squirrels in the attic. We took care of those. But a flying squirrel in the house, you got to be kidding me. On a night I'm not home. When I'm here, I've made it. I've threaded this needle. I'm about to get on the plane eventually here. And I will have made this. I will have pulled off this momentous event in my own life of heading to Texas for 36 hours and making it out at minimal cost. This crazy itinerary, all these logistics, and there's a flying squirrel in the house. She goes, yeah, I heard it outside the room, and then I heard a rustling on your side of the bed, and then I saw this thing run across the top headboard of our bed on my light and then run out, and then I ran out and put what's it called, towels under all the doors so it couldn't get out or in, and then I haven't heard anything. And I'm like, oh my God. So then I'm going back over my son's Nest Cam because there's an archive of 10 days. And so I was going back over the last hour, and I'm like, oh my God, I think at 6:08 I see something in his room jumping in the frame. And she's like, oh my God. And I said, I'm so sorry, I have to get on the plane. And of course I'm on the plane that has no Wi-Fi, has no connection to the world, has no entertainment. So I'm like, good luck. I don't know what you should do. And so I go through the whole flight, and I fell asleep actually. That's where I got my sleep. I planned it and it worked. I slept from the minute we took off all the way to basically we landed. So I got enough sleep to exist in the world. But then I'm thinking, I'm coming home to this. I'm coming home to a flying squirrel in the house when I'm this tired. Ugh. So I get home. I call her. She says, my mom's over. I'm like, oh, okay, you didn't leave? And she's like, no. I'm like, did you see the flying squirrel? And she said, no. And I said, So it's still in the house. And so you're thinking the worst. You're like, oh my God, is there an entry point to the main part of the house now for flying squirrels? You're just thinking the worst, which you should. I mean, it's freaky. This stuff doesn't happen. And so I told myself, on the way home, I'm going to stop at Home Depot. I'm going to get one of these traps where you put peanut butter in the little sort of platform in the middle, and then when they go to touch the peanut butter, the sides come down, and then they're kind of locked in this little cage. I said, all right, I guess that's what I'll do to get it. And so I pick that up. I come home. I'm home with them. There's still nothing. We're hearing nothing. We're looking around. There's nothing going on. And look, I'm as afraid as anyone. If I were home, it wouldn't have been much of a help, even though I feel bad not being home. I would have been out of the house running. And I'm afraid to run outside at night with the bears and such. So I'm there. Then it's time to put our son for nap at around 1 p.m., which he didn't end up doing. But what happened was we put him down, and then he got up out of his bed and then went into this little bonus room. You know, it's like a little part of the house where maybe where the roof comes down, so you couldn't extend a bedroom there, but you gotta have inside to cover how far out the house goes, so it's a little bonus room. It's a weird room with like a slanting down roof part, and it's really kind of unusable, but you gotta have something there. He goes into the bonus room. I follow him. We have a little teepee tent in there for him. And I said, Melanie, is there a stuffed animal in here? And she said, no. And I'm like, everybody out. The flying squirrel was just laying on its side in this bonus room. And I'm freaked out now. But I'm like, well, it didn't move. It stayed on its side the whole time Liam was in there running and then running out. Maybe it's dead. This might be easy for me. I can go up with the trap. I can get a broom and I can just kind of push it into the trap. So that's my plan. And Melanie's like, you got to handle this. I'm like, yes, I got to handle it. I often say, I am a male, but I'm not a man. Men do these kinds of things, but I'm going to muster it up and I'm going to do it. Even though I wanted to watch the Jets and Sam Darnold playing, who did they play in week 2? It's not coming to mind, but I wanted to see him play. It was his big second game after the great game he had against Detroit. And so I got it on my little YouTube TV on my phone, and I'm trying to formulate how I'm going to get this flying squirrel, which are gross. They are like bat, chipmunk, squirrels. They are weird. They have all the worst aspects of all those. So I open the door to this bonus room, and the thing's darting around. I'm like, oh my God, it's not dead. So I close it. Then I open it again, and it had moved close to the door. I'm like, oh my God. So I put down the little trap by the door, and over the next hour, because I'm that much of a baby, I slowly moved it towards the flying squirrel because I didn't want it to jump around. And it ultimately got into the trap just by me moving the trap under it. I closed the doors myself. I got it, put it on the back deck, and it was still moving a bit. But it was creepy. So we did end up getting it, but what the hell? So the next day I actually work from home, and I get the exterminators to come out. The flying squirrel expert, Tony, right? This little stout Italian guy. He comes in, and what he was able to formulate was that one single flying squirrel got in. Usually when you see one, there's 5 or 6 others. But he truly believes one just got in an unconventional way to the attic. And since we had all the flying squirrel work done where we took care of that situation, the flying squirrel got in and then had no way out. It was stuck in the attic. Then all it had at its disposal was the mice poison that's up there, the mouse poison. So with mice, I believe they eat the poison and then they run back out the holes because they can get through smaller holes, and then they die out somewhere in the outside quickly. If a flying squirrel eats the poison, which it never wants to eat, but it had no other choice, it had no other way to go, it can kill it over a week. So he believes it ate the poison up there, and then Melanie and her mom said, you need to use the attic for storage. Ever since I found out there was stuff up there, I said, we're sealing that sucker shut. The only time we're opening it is when the exterminators come and they want to go up there and check around. So we've kept it sealed. But now they got all these old baby clothes that they put into these little containers, and it was a lot of stuff that we have nowhere to put, so they're like, put it upstairs. And so the day before I went to Austin, I was like, let me be a good guy. Let me put this upstairs. And so over 10 minutes when I was putting things up this little, up this little ladder and putting them upstairs, Tony, the flying squirrel expert, said that the flying squirrel that was up there snuck down and then laid low from Thursday. And Joan, the babysitter nanny, said that she had heard something upstairs on the time she was there Friday, but she just kind of chalked it up. She told her husband that she thinks someone's upstairs, and maybe it was a flying squirrel. So maybe it was just fighting for its life. It was laying low for the most part, but we weren't thinking there was a flying squirrel. And then it made its break for freedom, 5 a.m. local time Sunday morning, when my wife called me, and that it was really its last fits of life. It passed on for the most part from the poison, because you don't see these things around. They don't make themselves, they don't make their appearance in front of humans a lot. They like to hide out. It's hard to see them. So that was a whole thing. Tony and his assistant took the flying squirrel out, and then it started pouring rain on Monday. So I put the trap outside to just get washed off from the peanut butter. I sprayed it with disinfectant and left it there. And then when I woke up the next morning, it was smashed to bits right where it was laying. And I yelled at Melanie. I'm like, did you run over the trap? And she goes, no, how dare you accuse me, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, it's completely smashed. Did your mom? And it's like, you would have known because it would be a big metal noise. But no, she didn't. And the peanut butter was gone. So a bear, it had to be a bear, totally took it to get to this little bit of peanut butter and then smashed it to pieces. That had to be it. I took it back to Home Depot. Luckily, they took it back, put the money back on my card, which was nice. And it was just a whole rigmarole. And now the thing I have to do, because Tony said it would be $3,000 to $7,000 for the pest control to do this, and he goes, don't pay us that to do it, you do it, is I have to go up there with a hazmat suit and a shop vac and a HEPA filter of some sort, because I have to clean up the bat crap which they see up there, or the squirrel crap, because they don't know if there's anything fresh in the attic if you don't clean up the old. And the reason you need all that stuff is apparently when bat crap lays there, nothing's the matter. The minute you go and try to stir bat crap up, apparently pathogens get released into the air. So I have to go up there as if it's hazmat. And I have to go up there with my shop vac in my ET outfit, my uniform, when they were trying to keep ET away from everybody, or they were interacting with them. And I have to clean up bat shit in my attic. And I have to shop vac it up only to see if it's old or if it's fresh, to then figure out if this whole cycle starts again where they have to be looking for new flying squirrel entrances. The joys of home ownership. So we'll see where that lands. I just don't know. I I guess you could have worse things, but it does feel like we're under attack the last year. From the chipmunk dropping into the basement and then jumping back out like a burglar, to a flying squirrel making its way into our formal home, the formal part of our home, not the attic. And now I got to go up there and clear a pathogen. Oh, joy. Well, I think that's where we are, folks. I think we're all up to date. I hope your fall is going well, your early fall. And we got more football coming. We got more college, more pro. We got some baseball coming up. Baseball playoffs going to be fun as we see the machinations of the 162 game season moving probably to a 163rd game in some aspects, especially in the National League. And we'll go from there. So thanks for listening as always, and I'll talk to you soon.